Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Elena Bongiorno, and I'm part of the curatorial team of this edition of the Diriyah Contemporary Art Biennale. And I'm here with architect and artist Leen Ajlan. Leen will take us today in a journey through the lives and afterlives of materials, but also Hijaz cultural practices, a bit of architecture, and a bit of games. She will talk about Takki, which is the artwork that is exhibited at the Biennale here. She will tell us a bit of behind-the-scene creative process that brought it to life, and then she'll also talk about some previous artwork, namely the Islamic Arts Biennale Commission, Geographies of Wood, and also a commission for the Triennale Milano from Magra's Harvest Canopy. Before I leave the stage to Leen, I just wanted to give a quick presentation of her practice. Leen is an architect and she's an artist. She's trained in London and she recently moved back to Riyadh. She's gonna tell all about it later. Her practice revolves around spatial design, specifically how it intertwines with sensorial experiences and also cultural memory. And through architecture, she aims to create spaces for communality, for social interaction and gathering, right? And also support traditional craftsmanships or crafts that are almost forgotten. And also she has an eye for ecological regeneration. Takki, I don't know if you've seen it. If you haven't, I urge you to go and see it when this panel is over. No, when this panel is over is another panel. Ryan, don't look at me that way. Maybe later on. Don't worry if you don't have game pieces, you can play with tiny rocks or fruit seeds. And it's outdoor. It's an outdoor loan that is part of a section of a Biennale that is called the arenas. The arenas are moments within the exhibition in which the public is invited to pause, to gather, to socialize, or to reflect in an immersive installation in which art is not merely observed, but is temporarily inhabited. So we're very happy to have Leen here with us. I'm going to let her explain everything, and then we'll follow up a Q&A.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Elena, for the wonderful introduction, to be honest. I'd like to start by sharing a really short film about Takki, which I feel like encompasses kind of what the project is about, helps everyone understand the project a bit better and maybe the movement behind it as well, which I think is important because I do think it comes off as a very static project until you see people interacting with it. This video was shot back in Al-Ala, 2023, I think, end of 2023, by the amazing Lorenzo, which I think a lot of you know. And I think it really helps kind of set an understanding of what the project is about, and we can discuss a bit more later, maybe the intentionality behind it and the materials and so on. So just to start, the project is made up of like I want to say like a platform or a stage that is designed in a grid format. It has a bunch of pieces on top that you can move around depending on like how many people are interacting with it, what they're doing, and maybe the tone that's being set. So it's set up for conversations, games, gatherings, in a lot of different formats. There's 6 pieces, which I like to call the takkayas, that you can pick up and move around. There's 2 different boards, depending on how many players or people are engaging with it, and you can also use it without any of the boards. So it's really built to be a lot of like hands-on experience and to be used, I think, like quite functionally, just depending on how many people are on it and what's the purpose. Maybe we can start a little bit on the background of it.
Yeah, I already have plenty of questions. So I think to honor also the title of this panel, I think talking a bit about the material that you use to construct Takki can be a very good first starting point to also kind of like understand what you said when you said that it looks a very stable, very fixed and still project, but indeed is a project also about movement. Yeah. So can you tell us a bit more about the material of Takki?
Yeah, so actually, maybe I'll go back a bit for the visual. The entire thing is actually made out of Indian teak wood that's reclaimed from actually the Hijaz railway from the Ottoman Empire, from the sleeper tracks, and also some of the actual, like the original, I want to say the carts, or the, what do you call the ones on the track? Yeah, carriages, thank you. Yeah, so the actual tracks and the carriages, and the really interesting thing about it is when Takki was being commissioned, and I was looking, I guess I didn't know what the materiality of it would be. I started working with like a local fabricator in Riyadh who, because the project is based in Al-Ula, already did a lot of projects in Al-Ula, and so he already did a lot of, they did a lot of like the public realm, kind of like, I want to say, benches, tables, etc. that are present there now. So I wanted, since I knew this would be an outdoor commission that would also be in the public realm, I kind of wanted there to also be uniformity with the existing context. So using a similar material or for it to kind of blend in and be a part of the local context. And so when I discussed it with him, and he mentioned that they had bought a lot of this wood that was reclaimed from the old Hijaz railway, and the way that they stumbled upon it was that it was just unwanted wood, and then just they had it in stock and it wasn't really being used for any of the projects. And I was like, that's incredibly interesting, because for me the link of the material, which already has such a strong like obviously context to the region, its use, and also it being reclaimed is amazing. And I feel like it really tied into the project that is about kind of like reviving old cultural like practices and stuff. So I was like, it just feel like it gave the project a lot more grounded, a lot more standing to where it is now. These are some photos from the actual sleeper tracks and the wood when we first got our hands on it, and you can kind of see a bit more of the process images of all of the work that we had to do to the wood to get it to obviously where the piece is now. So we tried to keep it to stay as true to the material as possible. So all we did was fill in a lot of the cracks and I guess the holes that were in the sleeper tracks. Because of course, back then, the tracks were made of wood like teak and oak, because they're very stable, very sturdy. They can handle a lot of heat. But then over time, they would start to splint and crack, and so they were then replaced with metal. So then these were no longer, I guess, in commission, so they were just left over. And so we tried to kind of maintain it as much as possible. We just added a bit of staining, which you can see in the last image, just to kind of create the grid that I wanted to create a differentiation in the platform. And then also use some of the pieces to actually make the boards that were also handmade by this fabricator, which is beautiful. And then so that was like the majority of the treatment that was done to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very interesting to see such a valuable wood, as teak wood, that is so neglected. And I'm very happy you managed to get it for Takki. I think that the interesting thing that it brings is that it embodies a bit the movement of the exchange that passed through those years between Damascus and Mecca, which also links to the board games, the games that are being played on Takki, on the platform of Takki, which are also games that have been moved and transformed and changed. For instance, Jackaroo comes from India and spread out in the Middle East.
Yeah, and so does Carom.
Yeah.
It's another board that you can play.
And I think chess was a military training device, and most of the board games were actually for divination tools. So yeah, I think movement in that sense is very much part of your work.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because, of course, the use of this wood wasn't, I guess, a part of the project intentionally from the beginning. But I think when we found it, I was like, it just added so much to the project, and it grounded it so much, and it made so much sense, and it was kind of like I want to say meant to be. It was amazing. But like you said, I think because, of course, the history of the Hijaz Railway is a lot about, like you said, bringing pilgrims over from across the world to Mecca for the pilgrimage. And with that comes a lot of their culture, their heritage, a lot of their practices, and then a lot of them settled in the Hijaz region. And then as a result, we have all these different games or cultural practices that we have that stem from that origin. So when I was in Al-Ula, I think a big part of this research was also spending a lot of time with locals, learning maybe a bit more about, I guess, learning a bit more about kind of like the way that they spend time. Of course, Al-Ula has a very different like way of gathering than we do in Riyadh and Jeddah. They spend a lot of time outdoors. They spend a lot of time with strangers and people that they don't know, just by inviting you to their homes or just like seeing you walk around and they know you're not from there, and then they ask you to engage with them and interact. And a lot of their communal gatherings were just based off them either playing really casual games or just having conversations. And this is one of the kind of like an example of a video that I took in Al-Ula where these two old men were like playing this game in the sand, and all they did was just kind of draw a grid using water. And every time it dried up, they just kept adding more water. And they would use the stones that were like, there's two different shades, which you probably can't pick up from this video, but the whole point of it was to kind of like make, to stop the other person from forming a line, kind of like connect four in a weird way. And I was like, that's so amazing, because it's so simple. It's such an easy way to pass the time. And they were just doing that in the shade. And I was like, it really inspired me to make a grid for Takki, but then it also, I think the grid was loosely inspired by that, because then there's so many different things that you can do with a grid without any tools or any like pieces or board games specifically. Like literally rocks work on a grid, sand works on a grid. Even your body, you can like make a game based off of a grid. So that was kind of the basis of that. And then I used that logic to kind of create more pieces that you can slot in and out depending on, of course, what movement you wanted to do. So it's just kind of an example of like the thought behind it.
I really like the element of the grid. Maybe we can go to the initial picture to show it. Both visually, yeah, that's perfect. The way that they are like staying differently also to indicate the possibility of movement and change and adaptability of the seating areas. And I like the fact that you're using the grid not in a modernist way, let's say more of a structuralist way, in a way that you can organically move things around and adapt according to the situation. And I think Lorenzo's video at first, in the first slide was showing that. And it reminds me a bit of that sort of vernacular types of grid, that they're very flexible to give room for people to interact with it. So this is not a question, actually, just a comment. Unless you have something to do about vernacular architecture.
No, what I was gonna add to what you're saying, like that a grid gives you kind of like openness and movement to add more things to it. I was gonna share the kind of like addition that we did in Paris.
Oh yeah, totally. And fun fact, I think that besides the movements of the history of the board games and beside the movement embedded in the material, also Takki traveled a lot.
Oh my God, yeah.
And Leen didn't expect that, so she made a very heavy base.
Yeah, I was like, the whole idea was that it was supposed to stay in Al-Ula, so I was like, though it's wood, it had to be sturdy because it's gonna be outdoors. It had to hold a lot of people.
Part of his work.
Yeah, so it has like a really large metal.
Tell us more about the Paris iteration.
Yeah, okay. So basically, after it was shown in Al-Ula, it actually went to Milan Design Week, which is amazing. Went to Paris Design Week, which is also great. But obviously, with that, there's a lot of different challenges because it has a really heavy metal substructure, which you can see so many people have to pick it up. I feel so bad, but it wasn't supposed to move. But it also had to be stable enough to hold a lot of people, which there was so many people kind of like using it in really different ways, like across all the travels, which was so interesting to see because obviously like here we'd sit on it on the actual floor and lean on the pieces, but in Europe they would actually sit on top of the stools because they thought they were like chairs. So you know, like just different levels of people using it was so interesting to see. But this is pictures particularly from Paris Design Week in 2024, which to me was really fun because we did a collaboration with a French designer who works a lot with like wood and leather to create more pieces to add on to Takki, which was always also the intention from the beginning, is that because it's a modular structure, like you can easily just add more pieces in the future by just designing them to have the same kind of like pegs that would slot into the grid. So in collaboration with her, we did these kind of like extra steps that would go onto the takayas to make a full chair that people can sit on. And then design a table that on one side is a chessboard that's inlaid with like different types of wood and leather. And on the other side, it's just like a plain table for people to use for any other kind of like game that would require a higher platform. And then of course the base underneath. And it's really interesting because it transformed it so much, it gave it such a new life. It looks like a different piece of work. And then seeing people in Europe interact with it differently was also really cool, because then this was something that was very specific to like her culture. And I didn't really, let's say, tell her we should do a chess piece. She just decided it was going to be a chess piece, which was amazing. And these are kind of like pictures of it when it was there. And you can just immediately see like it has such a different hierarchy now, which was kind of fun and really playful. And I think to me that was a very exciting thing to see, to be honest.
Yeah, I think playful is the right word. Yeah. It's interesting to see what happens when you think of an artwork very locally, but then that artwork needs to travel or has the opportunity to travel and to adapt. And I think that maybe without knowing it, you created a very open structure that could easily adapt to the context. And I think that also mirrors a bit the fact that it was born after you saw people playing in their courtyard or playing together. But then it went to always different context with people, other people playing on Takki. And I think it's nice to see that games are a very like binding agent. Did you think about this dimension of playing, of like getting together? Or what do you think about the role of games are actually doing for Takki?
To be honest, I think the idea of games was intentional from the beginning, because I wanted like a very open and like free format of interaction. And I feel like the idea of games did that, because it also encouraged you to interact with other people that you didn't necessarily know, and which I saw happening a lot in Elena specifically. And to me, I don't know, I just wanted also to be like playful, because there's a lot of outdoor, specifically in that context, a lot of outdoor seating, a lot of, I would say, open places to interact, but there's not necessarily an activity to do. And I kind of wanted that to start the dialogue so that people could actually be like curious to what it was, and then as a result interact with it in whatever ways they saw possible. So I always wanted it to be like fun. And then I feel like games did that.
Totally. And games are also nice because you never ask whose game is it. Yeah. Which is, it's very interesting nowadays. Yeah. Do you want to tell us also about the next projects on your slides? Maybe we can, yes, Geography of Oud. Yeah, so an excavated Geography of Oud was a commission for the first iteration of the Islamic Biennale back in 2023, I think. It's 2023. It's interesting because I was saying I feel like this project was a true test of kind of like how materiality limits maybe kind of like the outcome of what you're hoping to do. It wasn't designed in the way maybe that I originally intended, but I think because we were using Adobe Clay for it, and I think that was a challenge in itself. But a little bit more about the history of this project is it was born out of research into Aquilaria trees in Indonesia that are kind of like the key species that produce oud. And the way that happens is the tree actually naturally gets injured through like insects or species or stuff that invade it. And then as a result, when the tree tries to heal itself, it produces kind of like a sticky agar wood that is then extracted to become oud.
And so I think the process after that discovery is that, because oud is also very expensive, highly coveted, obviously exported all around the world, is that the trees are intentionally now injured and injected so that with like the disease so that they can heal themselves to produce oud. So it becomes like a very calculated process to injure a tree and kind of like injure that species over a long period of time to make a product that is very valuable. And so this piece was more so like a conversation about that process and how ironic it is that, of course, it's like a product that is used for cleanliness. It's very like Islamically, like obviously highly regarded to be used to clean yourself, but it comes from like a diseased plant. And the whole process of how that disease even happens and like how we exacerbate it to produce this product. So with this, the whole intention was kind of like the structure mimics a tree trunk. And the holes kind of signal that injury where like when they inject the tree with the disease. But what's kind of missing here actually is there's kind of like a map that shows like the process of how this injury happens and kind of like the result of it that was supposed to be carved into it. But the clay is really hard to work with and it was cracking and dry.
I know for experience.
Yeah, so we had to take it out. But the inside also, there was like a story of this like person that was tells a story of like how oud is extracted and how it happens, and then how we use it culturally in what context. So I also worked with like a local person who writes kind of like these how do I explain it? She writes a lot of like ballads and poems and stuff for like weddings and different like cultural events. And she wrote kind of like a really beautiful poem about this process and oud and how the oud is used in all these different cultural rituals, let's say. And so that was like an audio piece that was inside this. Yeah.
Can you explain us briefly how is used wood and how is linked to Hijazi culture and how that also is reflected in your work, not just in this work? Because you come from Jeddah, and I know that every Jeddawi is very So for people that are not familiar with the Hijazi culture, can you tell us a bit more about that, how it informs your practice?
I mean, I think it's interesting because there's so many things that you're used to as a person being from Jeddah that then you realize maybe other people in different parts of Saudi don't relate to, because it's a very mixed culture. It has a lot of different, obviously, influences from people traveling in for pilgrimage. So again, a theme is the same exact theme that's running from Takki to the following project, which wasn't intentional, but it was like, yeah, a lot of the different like cultures that we kind of mix throughout time that introduce all these different rituals and practices to you that are normal to you, but maybe not to people from other parts of the country. And I feel like this was a great example of a project that was born out of rituals that I saw as a kid, of like where you use oud in Bakhur and like for different like bridal events and things like that. But for me, like the ecological kind of like background to it and the process behind it was very fascinating to me, at least as a researcher. So I was like, the rituals that we're used to, that we see in a specific light, have different impacts and implications for the environment that we're not necessarily aware of. And to me, that was really interesting.
Yeah, totally. And I feel that you coming from that region, there is a region so rich of cultures and influence of migrations of the port city of Jeddah, of the pilgrims in Mecca, is very much reflected also in your choices for your works. I mean, also the games and the game boards are as much products of this type of cultural contamination. So you mentioned ecology, and I think it's a very important theme in your work, along with sensorial experience, which is obvious in this work. Can you tell us a bit more about how is ecology, how is your research evolving around ecology topics, and maybe also talk about the Magras project? and how you got to that research.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think we can share this. So I was saying to Elena before we started this talk, it's funny, a lot of my research is based off trees, which is really random and it wasn't intentional, but now I feel like that's the common theme. Maybe it's not. It is about trees. I love trees. But this one is also like, this project specifically started as a thesis that I did back when I was doing my architectural master's degree. And I was specifically looking into Al-Hassa, which is like a desert oasis that we have east of Saudi Arabia. And it's one of the biggest, obviously, producers of like dates, because they have the biggest date palm plantations there, and it's a really big, I want to say, it's one of the biggest producers in Saudi, and also exports of dates come from that region. And so I was specifically looking into how date palm plantations and date farming specifically in that region has changed over time, and the impacts of kind of producing dates has on the environment today because of all the excess like fertilizers and stuff that we use that run off into the water aquifers that then affect our quality of water, and how that cycle basically has changed over time, because of course now the more quantity of dates and stuff that you need to produce, the more you add to the environment to contribute to their weight and size. And I was really fascinated by like how, again, that impacted kind of like the current agricultural state of Al-Hassa. And so the research kind of started as a point to kind of think about ways where we can use, I guess, different existing kind of like farming practices crossed with like, I guess, local craftsmanship and different techniques that we already had in the past to create pieces that would support farming without the use of like excess fertilizers and other additions that would harm the environment. So a lot of the pieces, or a lot of the research, was actually working with local crafts people in Al-Hassa and people who own date palm plantations in Al-Hassa, to see where we can produce products that are made of date palm waste, to create products that would help the farming process, and also create kind of like a circular economy where you're not relying on any extra I guess external materials to kind of support this farming practice, and also in a way to rejuvenate the environment, because then you introduce it also takes introducing a lot of like support species and reducing, like I said, like the use of fertilizers and stuff to help kind of regenerate this I guess landscape. So some of these are like examples of different weaves. We collaborated with a craftswoman in Al-Hassa to produce. They're made out of date palm fronds. Some of them are made from different like hairs that you would extract from like the date palm trunk to like turn into different ropes, and then they would be weaved to make different size grids that would help with shading. They would help with like water collection. They'd help create kind of like a flat substructure that would shade the supporting species underneath palms so that they can thrive in that environment, and as a result feed like the palm and produce dates that are natural. It was a really fun project because when we went to see farmers as well, and we would show them the products, they were like, oh, this is great, because they would need, for example, like a specific, they would use like, at the moment, like some of them use like plastic bags and stuff to kind of cover the date, I guess, stems when they're being produced, so that they would keep away insects and stuff from them. And he found that the use of the plastic was actually reducing them in size over time, because they weren't getting as big. Yeah, they were suffocating. They weren't getting as big as they needed to be. So then we replaced it with like a mesh grid that was made out of like date palm fibers. And he was saying that when he weighed them at the end of the year, he had like a bigger yield and size specifically in the dates. So that was really interesting. And as a result of this, we made it was a series of experiments. We had 2 to 3 different products in the end that were actually used in Al-Hassa, in Maghras, at the palm, in the experiment farm that Sara and Lulu run in Al-Hassa, which they're doing a talk about at 7. So you can hear more about it then, to kind of just see how they can test in the environment and what results they would yield. This is just examples, photos from Madras, the Triennale in Milan, just kind of show them in the context of where they would be in a farm. And this installation specifically like shows like a 9-meter by 9-meter grid of palm trees and how the structures would sit in the middle or on the date palm trunks. And like I said, so after this, we're hoping that they would go to an actual farm and be tested in its actual environment to see, you know, what the results of it are. But the whole idea is that what's really fascinating about this project is how you can actually collaborate with local craftspeople and farmers to create a product that would actually help boost both, I want to say, economies, because crafts these days are just used as decorative items, but the skill that they have actually to produce these pieces are valuable, and they can be used to make things that are actually functional and help the environment and support their own, let's say, local economy. And so the hope is that even eventually they can be sold as pieces that would go to farms where farmers would use them. And of course, as a result, that would really support the actual farming agriculture kind of happening in that region when it comes to dates. Yeah, that's it.
Well, I think that first of all, they're visually beautiful. And they also serve a very important purpose. I really like the fact that you're talking about ecology, and this is a good example of ecology in your work. But it's not just about reusing material. It's not just about using waste to give it a new purpose, but as you said, it's more of a circular, widespread ecology that involves also the economy and the reality of the people working there with crafts. So I think for this reason, I think it's a very successful project. But I'm very curious to know what was the first feedback that you got from the local craftsmen, because yes, crafts now are intended as very decorative and not as a vernacular know-how practice that has been perfectioned over centuries, and it's worth using again because unfortunately with crafts it takes time, and we're in a very fast economy in which we don't want also to pay for time. But anyway, to go to my questions, I'm interested to know that the local craftsmen, when you went up to them being like, can you please wave me a gigantic tapestry to wrap dates on it, what did they say? Like, were they open to this new commission? Were they, how did they respond?
Oh my God, no, they were so confused. They didn't want to do it. Because I think the one thing about, at least what I've learned, because this is maybe the third project where we tried to engage local crafts people, is that they meet you with a lot of resistance, mainly because, not because they don't want to do it, it's just that they don't know how to do it any different. Because if you know like a specific type of weaving like way, maybe your whole, let's say, career of creating this, it's not as easy to kind of, I guess, change that to meet new functional demands, because again, for them, maybe at this point, it has become decorative, so that object kind of lost function a while ago. So for them, it's like difficult to kind of now adapt it to a new function, especially when maybe they don't understand the purpose from your side. So it took a lot of iterations to even like meet a product like of maybe like this look and feel. And if anything, I think this is also just another iteration of it and not the final version, because even like I didn't necessarily intend for this to be the final output, if that makes sense. And I think you can't control that part, because they have to meet you have to meet them where they are in their practice now and try to get them to understand kind of like the function that you're looking for and the look and feel in the final product, but they'll always kind of revert back to what they know in terms of the final outcome. So it was difficult. I think it requires a very hands-on experience. You have to be very patient. There has to be so many iterations. And then this is just one of them. I think this is version 2. There's a lot of pictures of like the previous versions that maybe didn't necessarily work. And then also we take them to the farm. We try to like tell the farmers like we want them for this function, and then they'd have their feedback and they'd say actually we don't need something of that size, or maybe the spaces are too large or the shadow is too much. So then we'd go back and redo them again. And even like here, I guess it's maybe not that clear, but in the photo of the canopy up close, we have 3 different types that are like kind of stitched together, but that is also more so for the sake of the exhibition to show what the different, let's say, conditions that we catered for. But in reality, they would all be their own individual pieces because they all serve like very different functions. Like some of them are for like I said, to help like the actual protection of like the dates when they're being produced before they're harvested. One of them is to kind of like support shade, supporting species on the substructure of the farm. One of them is like for water collection. So they're all different, but we tried, at least aesthetically here, they're all stitched together just to kind of give an idea of all the different conditions that we're creating with these different kind of like, I guess, crafts, I would say. But yeah, it wasn't an easy process. And I think there's still like more versions of it to come, to be honest.
When was this project done?
When was it finished?
Yeah.
This is this time last year, actually. Maybe, yeah, like maybe early, mid 2025, like March 2025.
And do you know the aftermath of this? Do you know if they keep on weaving this harvest canopies?
No, so actually, because it was on display in Milan for about 6 months. It's actually just made its way back to Maghreb in Al-Hassa, like maybe last month or so. And so it actually hasn't started being used physically in a farm yet. But those are kind of the next steps for it to start to be used and for us to get feedback possibly in a year, because you need to wait a full harvest year. And then we can assess where it's at and then adapt it as a result. But I want to say like the crafts people that we worked with they're so incredible. They're very lovely. They're very smart, and they have so many amazing suggestions from their side as to how to produce it. But yeah, it just requires a lot of like hands-on experience. And like also a part of this was for one of the canopies, and they were struggling to kind of grasp the idea of what we were going for. We found an Asal weaver in Bahrain, actually, who was like this really incredible person that has been practicing for like over, taught 2 different generations of his family of how to like weave Asal specifically. And we brought him to Al-Hassa, to the farm, to do a workshop with the local craftswomen in Al-Hassa to actually teach them how to do it. So that was a really interesting, like also cross engagement that just came as a result. So those are like some of the kind of, let's say, part of the process that we went through to produce these pieces, which was also really beautiful because then we created a lot of different relationships. A lot of people showed up to that workshop. They were really excited to engage with it. And to us, that was really important, actually, because it serves a bigger purpose and kind of like this experimentation farm where you can constantly produce products outside of the context of just an exhibition, and they can actually be like functional in the future.
Yeah, totally, absolutely. And I really like that both in these projects, but also in Takki, it's like you kickstart ecosystems of craftsmen and other expertise that they meet, and they're all very much grounded in deep research. I know that Takki was developed over a residency. It's not the case for this work, but I was wondering how important is the phase before you actually get in touch with a craftsman and you build something, and how do you navigate that territory of research and finding the right people and talking to suppliers. As an architect, myself too, I know that suppliers and craftsmen are extremely important. So how do you approach this research methodology? You just go and knock at doors like you did in Takki and look at people playing. You build a network. You ask around colleagues. Like, how does it work?
Honestly, I think it's pretty much that. It's you'd be surprised how many people that are willing to talk to you when you just look for them. Like it's actually not that hard to find. Like people are so, I think they get excited when you engage with like their craft or like their you know, existing like work method or research, like they're actually really excited that someone has a similar interest and is willing to share that information with you. So I didn't really have any kind of like roadblocks in that sense. In fact, people are actually really, you know, excited for like an exchange of information and want to learn more about your project and practice and want to contribute. So that's exactly what happened with Takki. That's exactly what happened with Magres. Like, I don't think there's like a shortage of maybe information. It's just that it's a little bit more difficult to find. It's not as easily published, especially works on traditional crafts and things that are maybe also no longer practiced today. So I think you do definitely hit a few roadblocks in that sense, but and maybe like this is not even, sometimes I think like this is just a product of the information that I know now, but it's like there's so much out there that could probably contribute to it that I don't know about, and then that could change and create so many different versions of it in the future. So this is only like, I always say like it's a process and it's never the final version. It's always like stuff that I like to make products that I always feel like I can add to.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned process, which fits within the description of your work. It reminds me also a bit of a research of a documentarist. Do you keep any archival information or do you document in terms of photographs or writing down names, biographies of weavers that are 90 plus years old, technique, products, things that are part of your work? We just see the final outcome in Takki, but behind that there is a very long history also for this project as well as geography of wood. So do you keep an archival of these processes or not? And if not, is that an intention for the future?
I think it exists, but maybe not as comprehensive as maybe I would like it to be, because you do face a lot of maybe restrictions in terms of people wanting to be, let's say, filmed or documented in specific ways. So you always have to be very conscious of that, especially like with elders or people who are not necessarily comfortable always being like recorded on even like voice or on camera. There was a lot of restrictions in that sense, especially in Al-Hassa. So a lot of it had to be written, or just like you can take photographs of the product, but not necessarily of the person who's weaving it or having the conversation. And then also because a lot of the times when you're commissioning someone, let's say to make you a version or iteration of something, if you're not there to take those photos yourself, they don't actually have like a common practice of like even taking those photos of you. So you get like one photo every like few weeks, which is difficult when you're trying to monitor a process and you're not physically there. So then we had to do a lot of like in-person visits to push that process along ourselves. But I think for me at least, it's a lot of written research and a lot of drawings that I make myself of the research.
Yeah.
Which is such an architect thing to do.
That's also part of keeping track of a process. And I think that besides pictures, also you writing or whatever audio recordings or pieces of the rocks that they use to play or bits and pieces of weaved tapestry are also acceptable. I think our time is almost over to leave some space for questions, but I have a final one for you. So we saw that Takki is embedded with movements in its wood, in the games, but also itself. So it was in Alala, it was in Milan, it was in Paris, and now in Riyadh. So what's going to happen next? What is your dream-like future for Takki? What would you like it to become?
I think for me personally, I don't get attached to the final product itself, because I always say I like things to change, to move. There are always iterations. I think for me, at least now, it's been shown a lot in its current context as what it is today, but I would like to give that wood specifically a new life and maybe like recycle it into a whole new project, because the wood itself is a piece of heritage. The wood itself has a lot of history. To me, it's more valuable than the actual format that it's in now. And I'd like the chance to give it another life by like morphing it into a new product that can be used again in the public realm in a different context. Because I feel like to me that's a more interesting way of preserving that history and keeping it alive, and it kind of cements the idea of movement and the fact that this wood, again, it comes from like such a crazy rich history in a railway, and now it's like a piece in this board as a public, in the public realm as a game, and now it can be something else. So yeah, the hope is definitely to recycle it into something new.
Incredible. Can you imagine the next artwork made with wood that traveled so much, literally, for more than a century?
It's more than me.
Yeah, incredible. All right, thank you, Leen. I think we can open the ground for some questions. We already have one here.
Hi. This is a question from the guest. My name is Diriyah. I was with Leen in the program in the villa when he was happy.
She's in the villa.
I have a video.
Oh, wow.
This artwork, I think, was one of my favorite among the other projects that came out of the residency, which is Takki. And I think the fact that this product is being moved a lot since then, I think it's an evidence to me that we need more of such format. I know you're more about the material and you're trying to recycle it into something else, but I think coming from also Hijazi, the same city you are from, which is Jeddah, because in Jeddah we always have this outdoor seating everywhere, especially in like the old neighborhoods in Jeddah. There's always in each neighborhood, each hara, they have this seating called Dekka, which is like this square where like the elders sit and they sit all day and they watch everyone going around. And I think when you look at Saudi, you think that the weather is so hot and no one's going to sit outside, but that's not true.
Everyone sits outside.
Everyone's outside. And I think going into modern architecture, we're losing these kind of seatings. Everything is turning into a bench or like a waiting kind of chair, but the idea of sitting outdoors, playing outside, I think it's not something that's just for kids. I think having a space of play is a right for every adult. And I really, like when I saw this when I was in Rada, I was like, man, we need this Takki everywhere. We need it everywhere. Like I really hope like, I know it's been hard probably to move it around depending on the material, but I also think that as much as I love the material and the history behind it, I also love the format that you made. And I really hope that you can explore maybe the format and some other material that's easy to move around, easy to stay outside. So yeah, I don't know if you have plans for that moving forward or not.
Thank you for your question and honestly your beautiful thoughts. I completely agree with you. I think because again we experienced it firsthand, like the feedback to it, the reaction to it, the way it's being used, and like you said, we already have a really rich history of like being outdoors and the need for public structures outdoors, like you said, that are not necessarily waiting benches is so important. And this is exactly the kind of format that I also love so much and exactly what I wanted for this project. So yeah, I'd love to definitely explore that format more. And even if, let's say, this piece specifically, because again, about the one thing about it is it's restricted in terms of size and weight and like a little bit difficulty of movement as a result, but there's so many different, like you said, versions of it that can be created that are a lot more, let's say, transportable and easier to move that could hold a similar format. So you're right, it's not necessarily getting rid of like the idea of the platform in an open format where people can engage with, but maybe it's just seeing how it could have a new life and maybe, I don't know, maybe it's even just a smaller scale. So yeah, no, I completely agree with you. So thank you so much for your thoughts.
Thank you so much, Elena. I have maybe a question or a question and a half. The first one is, do you think the reclaimed wood from the Hijazi Railway is in the essence of the artwork of Takki? Like if you used another kind of recycled wood, would it have the same value in it? That's the first question. Second question is, do you think that there was a barrier of language between you and the craftsman in Hassa, not in the sense of actual language, but like do you speak in a different kind of dimension? Like trying to get your thoughts into them and then they bringing it to life for it?
Thank you for your question. I think honestly, yes. Starting with Takki specifically, I think again, like when it was designed, I had no idea yet what the product or the wood or the format, the look and feel that would have in the end. It was always designed as that this is the grid, this is what I wanted in terms of function. And then the wood came as a result of, like you said, me just going around to fabricators in the region trying to figure out what it could be made of. But you're right, it added so much essence to the project that now I can't imagine it any other way. I feel like it would have had a very different impact, and even just like besides the physical result, like the impact and the reaction to it wouldn't be the same because it's so like distinct in its format now, and the look and the feel add so much history and research to it that I think it makes, at least for me, the reaction that I got from people is a lot more like kind of like fondness of it, or like an immediate kind of like likeness to it just as a result of like where it comes from, especially if they're also from the Hijaz. Like that just makes such an instant connection, and that wouldn't be replicated if it was made out of something else. And to be honest, I always knew in my mind that it would be a type of wood because of just the way that I wanted the grid to work and the slots and the function, and it's outdoors. It couldn't be made of anything else that's heavier or not as durable, etc. So no, it was such a perfect match. I couldn't honestly have made it myself. I couldn't have made it up. It just happened. And then El Hassa, your other question about kind of interacting with local craftspeople, it's definitely a different language. Like, first of all, like even the dialect of Arabic that we speak is different. So me describing something to them in Arabic, they might not even get it because they have such different words that they use for it that even I had to bring in someone from El Hassa to be like, can you cross-translate? So it was a 3-level translation process to get to one result, and then it's a wrong result, and then we had to do it again. So yeah, it was definitely a lot of, this one I said it was a lot of iterations. It was literally because of that. So you learn a lot from the process. You learn also a lot in terms of language, way of working, format, like that made such a big difference, which is also humbling because you think like, oh, we're all Saudi, it's going to be the same thing, but it's really not. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you to our lovely panel.
Thank you.
We're going to